Welcome to Powerplayers in Business and Life with Adrienne Richardson, the show where brilliant leaders in business share powerful insider secrets and strategies to succeeding in life and business. Now, here's your host, Adrienne.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Adrienne Richardson, founder of the Powerplayers in Business and Life podcast, where I get the honor of interviewing fascinating, big-hearted people who have brilliant minds. Today's guest is Dr. Carrie Rose. She's a #1 best-selling author, educator, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, Thinkific expert. She is amazing and notably one of Huffington Post's must-follow women entrepreneurs. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Central Florida and wrote her doctoral dissertation on professional development. And she's best known for her innovative teaching strategies, methodology related to course completion rates, online courses, and really the development of the science of learning. Her methods have been shared with Neal's Yard Remedies, National Mainstreet Organization, JetBlue, and more. And right now, she works with entrepreneurs, online marketers, and businesses around the country to provide the highest quality of learning strategies with the greatest amount of impact on a variety of different platforms. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here today because this is a hot topic, especially, talking about course creation. It's a big thing in online marketing. And so I know that our listeners are going to love what they're going to learn about today.
Yes.
So, yes. And just like I shared just now, you're a power player when it comes to the science of course creation. I'd love for you to tell us what that means.
Sure. So, honestly, Adrienne, when I first got into this, I didn't jump headfirst into the world of online marketing or online courses. I was sitting at a World of Beer one night, and 3 internet marketers came in, and it sounds like the setup for a good SEO joke, right? But they came in and they started talking to me, and I was like, "What do you guys do?" And they're telling me all about online marketing, SEO, affiliate marketing, and all of these things that I had no idea were even taking place in the world, right? And I was very curious at that point and had to learn it and had to understand it because I didn't like not knowing things. And so I jumped in and they gave me access to online course after online course. And what I saw over the period of time when I was watching these is wow, these are some, no offense guys, but some really bad examples of education, right? They were, people tend to do what's been done. They repeat processes, right? And so whatever they've been shown in their education experience, they were repeating inside of these online programs. It's nobody's fault, but it's definitely not based on any kind of best practices. So what we've done over time is we've created a process based on over 500 research studies on how the human brain connects to content. And that's what, we build our courses through to this day. So everything that I do when it comes to an online course or online program is actually based in brain research. So that's when I say the science of learning, that's what I mean. It's not just, you do a lot of things that are data driven. And you probably look at a lot of different forms of data, maybe you're triangulating data, you're looking at 3 different sources at the same time to see what the actual impact is. A lot of people in the online marketing space are looking at one thing, I did this and so I'm going to do that, right? If this, then that kind of scenarios with their numbers. When we're talking about 500 research studies, we're talking about meta-analysis. So not just one study under a controlled basis did this, this impact the outcome. This means hundreds of studies over and over again to prove what the power of impact that variable has on an outcome. So what is going to create the greatest impact over the longest period of time? So anyways, no, not really the longest period of time, but the greatest impact on that human being for the span of their life. What does that look like? So yeah, that's where my fascination lies, is really in how do we take these programs that are, sitting around with a 3 to 5% completion rate on average, right? And making them something that, people will finish and will apply. Because I like to look at the world as if I'm a little Pollyanna, but what would the world look like if? What would the world look like if every person that purchased these online courses had the result that they were promised,
Yeah.
right? What would that mean in terms of their relationships, their health, their family, their loved ones, their business, their finances? What does that world look like? And to me, that's the world I want to live in. So I want to be a part of creating what that is.
Yeah. Well, so first off, let me say, most people don't think about course creation in that way. A lot of people these days are looking at creating a course because they're looking for this passive income, right? Like, I'm going to create this course. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to put as many people through it as I can. I'm going to make as much money as I can. And I want it to be easy. And not everybody, but that is a lot of way people look at it. And like you said, there's not a lot of thought put into, are you presenting the material in these courses in a way that is easily digestible, in a way that people can learn and understand? And because most of the people that are out there creating courses are an expert in what they do, but they're not necessarily an expert in teaching it.
Right.
And those are two different skills, right? Like, that's what you're saying is there's, a way to teach something that works with someone's brain and allows them to learn it, and therefore are more likely to complete it and get the outcome that they wanted. And I just think that a lot of people don't even think about that. It's just like, well, I'm going to go on here. I'm going to tell people what I know, show them what to do. And that's about as much thought as goes into it. It's not any further than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not through any fault of their own. I hope I've said that enough times.
Yeah.
We're just like we're repeating patterns, and the idea of passive income from an online course is juicy, right? I mean, that's definitely a reason to jump into it. And, scaling yourself back from your business and having another means to take care of your family, and having those little notifications happen on your phone, oh, I just got a sale while I'm walking through the grocery store. Oh, I just got a sale while I'm taking a shower. Like, those things are great. I'm all for it. I'm all for the life of freedom that can provide, or at least more freedom than you would have if you were just service-based. But, we found that we were getting as high as 96% completion rates for our clients before we even really started looking at what causes high completion rates. Just from looking at, adding the process that I created, just from using brain research to determine how we're going to instruct. That was it. That's where all of my fascination into completion came from, because I was like, we're getting 96% and the industry average is 3 to 5. Like, holy cow. There's a big difference between, I can't say what's going to happen all the time, but I can say what's possible is very different than what's currently going on in the industry, and it's kind of fascinating. So, yeah.
Well, and I agree. The idea of creating something that allows passive income is a way to scale your business and doesn't require you to be, always the one showing up and doing it. And so I love the idea of that too, where I think that what maybe people don't consider, and like you said, I'm not saying people are doing this purposely, but it's like I've been hesitant myself to create a course because I want to make sure that what I'm putting out is going to make a difference for people and that they're going to get results. And so many people these days are experiencing it where they're not getting results. And some of that is because they just aren't completing it, that maybe if they did complete it, they would get the results. So it's not necessarily that the program itself, is lacking. It's just, like you said, for whatever reason, something is keeping them from completing it. So what would you say, what is the main reason that most people finish 3 to 5% of a course and yours is getting 96%?
Honestly, I wrote an entire book on it because I don't ever think of things as one variable. I look at things as a multitude of variables, what all are impacting this one thing, right? And the difference, honestly, before we even started looking into it, the difference was just approaching it with, proper instructional strategies. Really geeky, really basic, but that was what made the difference originally for us. When I started looking into it, I started researching with different marketers what their results had been, and what they've found. Because when I look at an online program, I look at that as a combination of education and online marketing. I don't see it as just an education program. I think that's a very dangerous trap when we just view it as one or the other. Like you were saying, some of the marketers end up getting into a point where oh, it's just a passive income thing, right? And then you've got the other side of it where we've got academics that create something that never sells. So therefore, doesn't get completed on the other side, right? So we've got to look at how do we really blend these worlds, right? And for me, the start of everything, and this goes for your marketing and your course creation and the education side of it, the start of everything is really just creating really solid, really clear outcomes based on what people want to buy, right? So looking at, actually taking the time to do market research in one way or another, right? I'm a huge fan of the ask method if you have a list that justifies using it. Or you have access to a list, or you're running ads. I mean, Ryan Levesque goes into some great detail inside of his book on how do you do market research in that method. But like, I've seen people kind of take his method and kind of, I don't know, tweak it in a way where it's like, this isn't in alignment with what he actually told you to do, and you're doing something else. And I'm not sure it's actual like solid market research. Or you could look at like what people are already purchasing, like going onto Amazon and doing research that way, and finding out what's already selling and what people are already asking for and what they're saying is the content holes that they're looking for and that's not getting solved, and creating something that's based around that. Now, either method is still only going to give you like part of what this process is as far as creating that outcome for them, but it's at least going to give you the start as in listening to people, you know. And one way or another, however you can, go out and listen to people and figure out what they're actually going to purchase. Because if they're not going to have the same like a visceral desire to purchase, they're not going to have that desire to complete either, right? So like either way, don't make it for you. Don't make the course for your cousin or somebody you used to skateboard with in middle school. Like, make it for the person that's going to actually purchase this program, and then get really clear on like what the one major overall outcome is, and then what smaller outcomes they need to reach in order to have that outcome in their life. Now, one of the major problems that I've seen since being inside of the online marketing space is that people tend to go, okay, I'm going to drop everything I know inside of my online course. And that's not an outcome based. That's an everything inside your head based, right?
Right.
Which
There's a lot going on in my head.
Yeah. I'm sure it's great in there, Adrienne. But like, it's not what your client actually wants to buy or finish. And so we end up with some products that are, I've talked to people who have products that are 25 hours long or 45 hours long. And nothing needs to be that long. In fact, when I looked into professional development research back in the day, like when I was writing my dissertation, the only time that any professional development had an impact and an outcome measure was based on time was when the professional development was over 300 hours long. So unless you're going to create a course over 300 hours long, the amount of time has nothing to do with them getting their outcome. It's like not proven in anything. So step away from creating these gigantic projects that are horrible for you and them. Like, just imagine the length of time it takes to somebody to produce a, 25-hour program, right? And really start peeling it back, because the fact is, more than likely you are brilliant. More than likely you have like an amount of expertise in this world where you could really show somebody what you're doing, and doing well, and share that out there. And because I'm talking to the achievers on this podcast, right? So like, if you've got all of these things in place, now it's a matter of breaking it down into how are you bundling it? Instead of picturing it as like, here's one giant course of everything I know. Well, here are the outcomes that I can get people. And here are the smaller outcomes that are needed in order to get this one major outcome. And this outcome's a course, and this outcome's a service, and this outcome is a combo of the two. Like, it's more about looking at that bundling and what's going to help and support your customer on their journey, as opposed to just doing a brain dump of everything inside your head. So it's like a step away from that.
Well, I see this all the time, is where people think that the more stuff they put into the program they're selling, the more value it will have and the more likely people will be to buy it. And so they're like, hey, we have 45 videos and a 128-page PDF and, 200 of these, and then you get this, and then you get this. And they think that by giving more and more and more, it's going to make it just a no-brainer and easy for someone to make the decision to buy. But buying something and actually completing something and getting the outcome are two different things. And for me, I know that when I'm looking at something, I might be really, really interested in a course and I'm reading the page. And as soon as they start breaking it down and they're like 45 videos about this and 38 downloads, I'm like, I don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like immediately I go to, wow, that's way too much. And it actually turns me away. And so I feel like that is really, I don't know where people got that information from, if it's taught or they just assumed, but like people think that giving more is going to make people want to buy it more. And I'm the kind of person where if you're like, I can show you how to do all of this in 8 30-minute videos, I'm like, boom, I'm in. Right. And so like you said, I think what happens, I'm glad you just said this because it really just, appeared to me is that they're trying to do too much in the program they're selling. And that's why there's a bajillion videos and downloads instead of maybe you focus on chunk it down to like an outcome. And then obviously there's other things they can buy to build onto the outcome. So I'm curious if you have, I'm sure you do, like a recommendation on what is a good amount of time or is there a certain sweet spot of how long a program should take to consume?
Right. So, I mean, just to touch on what you're saying, I absolutely agree with you. And I think most people have that response, right? When I talked to my first mentor about this, because people kept saying add value, and I came from a different background. So in the background I was in academia and education, we didn't talk about things in terms of adding value, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, what does this mean? Because I hear it everywhere, but like, I'm not really sure what that is. And he's like, well, adding value is simply solving a problem. And I'm like, okay, so when you talk about time, my question then back to you is, how long will it take you to solve the problem? Right. And then what's the value of that problem in terms of dollars, right? Because that's the other side of it. I mean, that's really what you're selling. You're selling solving the problem. You're not selling the amount of time. And when I look at time, I look at not just, how many hours am I offering them? I look at it as the reverse of it. How many hours am I taking from them? How many hours am I taking from their families, from their lives, from the things that they would much rather be doing? I'm sure than solving the problem. Yes. Really, they just want the problem solved, right? So I heard it from John Cook, who's a copywriter, a friend of mine, and he said, we're really all in the mattress business. We're trying to give people a good night's sleep. So focusing on it that way. But for me, I like to see courses that are around that 4 to 6 hour mark. Mm-hmm. I think they're super reasonable. I think they're super reasonable to get through. And I think they're super reasonable for the course creators to create. When we film our courses with our clients, we do it in one day. So we have like a 3 days build up where we're building out the content, and then we film in one day and just knock it out. And you can do that with a 4-hour course, but with a 25-hour course, oh my gosh, how long would it take you to film that thing? I can't even imagine.
Well, that's a great point, because not only are you saving your customers time, you're saving yourself time by not needing to create 25 hours of content.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, just focusing on that outcome for them, it also helps you put a fence around like what you're going to put inside of it, right? So if it doesn't, I break things down from outcomes into focus questions, but basically like if it doesn't answer the focus question, which is directly related to the outcome, it doesn't go inside the course. That's for something else. If it doesn't help them get the thing, then it doesn't go there. My course is video length, running time, 1.5 to 2 hours. Mm-hmm. But I believe in a different method of education. I believe the student will work harder than the teacher. So my course instructs people on how to create their online course using my process, but it is going to take them more than 1.5 to 2 hours to complete it, because really they're only complete once their course is created. Right. That's when they're complete, right? So it's more about what are you having them do, and how are you having them be as a result of going through your program? What's really missing are those two components in most programs. I've seen a general turn in the market in the last couple of years to make sure that things are action related, but I think there's a lot further that we can go when it comes to that. But the be about it piece is something that's hugely missing, because let's just say this. I took a course on branding when I got started, and it told me I needed a logo, and it told me I needed a headshot and a website and some social media presence, right? And I'm going through all of this, and I'm like, okay, but what kind of a logo? And how do I even think about hiring someone to create that? Or like, how do I know if my headshot's good? Like I didn't know how to think about any of those things, but the person that was doing the course, they did, but it's just that they didn't offer it to me. And what I mean by offer it to me, there's a different way of doing it. So a lot of times people will spoon feed you their thoughts, right? I'm doing a gesture over here of spoon feeding, like you can see it. A lot of people will spoon feed you their thoughts, and like, you'll see things like, I'm going to tell you the 5 things, what 5 things, these 5 things, got those 5 things, go, and that's kind of it's in what we call recall, which is like the very basics of learning. You might have called it regurgitation at some point when you were in high school, but it's like, the right there kind of answers to the questions. But a right there kind of response doesn't actually require your brain to think. But when you require someone to think about something, they actually get more of an outcome. This has like more research in it than any other strategy that I use. When you're teaching somebody to be a certain way about some things, you almost want to get to the point of, what can I ask them, or what can I have them do to think differently than they do right now? What's going to create that paradigm shift, and how am I going to invite them into the way that I think about it without telling them how I think about it? Right. Because we've got a lot of programs that kind of create dependence on the course creator. So people aren't really getting their outcomes when they're done. They've just gone through and watched a bunch of videos, but they're not thinking any differently than they were prior to taking it. So like basically, in essence, not a whole lot of learning really takes place in that way.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that a lot of, like you said, the person was like, oh, you need to create a logo. And you're like, well, how the heck do I go about doing that? And so it's important, sounds like what you're saying, and when you're creating a course, is that like, if you're going to tell someone, what you don't want to do is what you're telling them to do, to create more questions for them that are unanswered that keeps them from moving forward. Like you need to be able to answer those questions. If you're going to give someone an assignment, give them enough information that they can actually go and fulfill that without getting stuck on like, well, I don't have enough information in order to go do that assignment.
Right. But it's also a matter of like, how do you create the inquiry so they're thinking about it? They're not blocked from it, but they're thinking about it on their own and in their own terms, And then like, oh gosh, this is like a little divergent, honestly, but like one of my favorite things to include inside of courses are non-examples. So, you know what an example is. The non is just the opposite of it. So like, what's not an example of a citrus plant or citrus fruit, like an apple? Okay, an apple's not an example. But like, if you're thinking about it in terms of courses, it could be like how to do things the wrong way. Or how this logo fails miserably, that could be a thing.
No,
without bashing someone, of course, but
no, this is good, because so here's the thing is, I've done a lot of teaching over the years about Facebook ads, and people, it's just like a light bulb is going off right now, because people always say like, oh my goodness, I've never gone through any course where it's so easy to follow and so easy to understand. And usually I get confused when I start learning about Facebook ads, and you just made it so simple. And the reason that I do that is because, and I'm just now having, like I said, this aha moment, is because I don't just tell people what to do. I explain to them why they're doing it. Like I want people to understand how it works and why they're doing it, because then they can think on their own. Because right now we watch a video, you click a couple buttons and you set up an ad. But if you don't really understand the how and the why and all that stuff behind it, then when you go on and it doesn't look exactly the same anymore, or something has changed, then they're just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do.
Right.
They're frozen. And so, but when someone understands why they're doing something and how it works, like you said, you're educating them more than just teaching them to, what to do. It's like, here's why you're doing this. And one of the other things that you said, just totally forgot my train of thought, was on, the examples. And so people would always ask me like, can you give me an example of a good ad? Can you give me an example of a picture? Can you give me an example? And while I do provide some examples, I actually don't like providing examples, because what people do with examples is they just copy them because that's easy, right? And so I'd rather give them a template for like when you're writing ad copy. If I give them an example, here's good ad copy, they will literally take that ad copy and take out certain words and just plug them with their own words. But what I like to do instead is give them a template. like on the first line of your copy, you're going to look for, a really amazing question or statement that grabs people's attention. On the second part, you're going to do this. And so now you're giving them the tools on how to build any ad at any time about anything versus saying, here's a good example of something that worked and they just copied it. And then when that stops working, they don't know what to do. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love how you're saying also the why and the how too. You got to understand that like certain people have to have that information. Certain people are how people, certain people are doers. I'm a why, and whys are literally probably the most annoying on the planet. But like, if you don't tell us why we should pay attention to whatever you're telling us, we tune out. Like I've been in 8 hours worth of professional development on a day and walked away going, I don't know why I was here because I never heard the why. So I never wrote anything down. Yes. So a little more stubborn than most probably, but you've got to really pay attention to that. Like, what are you giving them to attract each learner in? And it's interesting because, differentiation is one of the learning strategies that carries, it carries a lot of weight. When I talked about those meta-analysis earlier, there's different studies. But it's something that I think a lot of people kind of lean away from inside of these online courses because they're static. So you kind of think of things in terms of like differentiation is giving each person what they need at the moment they need it. And so it can be it can be a little difficult to do if you don't know how to do it. But there are ways to provide different tools and different aspects inside of your course where you can differentiate by your process for everybody that's going through it. But it really just takes a little bit of forethought and planning there and understanding like what different learners need.
That's great. Okay, so this has been awesome. This has been really helpful. And I know anybody that's listening is getting a lot of either ideas of what to do, or like you said, they're like, oh crap, I know what I should not do now.
Right.
And this has been great. One of the other things that I like to talk about on this podcast, and I'd like to switch gears for just a minute. And,
sure.
In creating the podcast, a big thing for me was I wanted to educate people on certain topics, but I also wanted to inspire people. And the way that I find that myself and a lot of people get inspired is like, we've all had challenges and sometimes we feel like we're the only one going through them or we're all alone or something like that. And I would love whether, for you to share maybe a big challenge that you had either in growing your business or in the process of this or anything that you went through and kind of how you worked your way through that and got to the other side.
Gosh, everything was a challenge when I first got started. So let's let's start with that. I had mentors and I had people that were helping me and supporting me, but it literally took me a month to make my first landing page, and it was really bad. And so, like, if you're going through any of those things, like, trust everybody's been there at some point. I was very lucky in that I have my business partner, who's also now my husband, with me to point out things that needed improvement. He's very good at that. And then actually go do it. He has all of those kinds of skills that I was missing. And so that was very, very helpful. I think that the main process that I underwent, I think, throughout this journey that's made the most impact, aside from having my husband, because, y'all don't have him with you, next to you all the time. So you your journey. So, just looking at things you can do. I think, well, two things mainly, or three, actually, sorry, let me do this. Having some sort of a gratitude practice, because the days will get hard. There are times where sometimes when you have little baby problems, when it's just starting, and then when you've grown, you just get bigger problems. We call them better quality problems, but they still exist. And if you have a way of just being thankful for what you do have and focusing in on where things are going right, it's a lot easier to keep your sanity and keep focused on what really actually needs to happen, as opposed to the world is collapsing. Because the journey of entrepreneurship is lonely. It's different, and nobody really understands what you're going through. But if you have that kind of a practice and some sort of faith in yourself, it can be, a huge benefit for you. The other thing that I would look at is self-care. I mean, a lot of people talk about it. Are you doing it? Like, are you meditating? And I'm not good at meditating, so I put it out there, but I don't do that one. Are you doing yoga? Are you going to the gym? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you putting your computer down at a certain time, or are you still working at 11:30 at night? Because nobody's telling you to or not to. So you have to tell yourself not to, and focus on what matters, your family and your life. And then the third thing that's been I think the most beneficial also, I'm tying them all together, but really they're very helpful for me. The third thing is, it's from a Mark Twain expression, it's eat the frog. Whatever the most difficult thing is that you need to do that first.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people have a tendency, and maybe it's just me, and I'm just generalizing.
No, it's not just you.
I have a tendency to put off the difficult things, because the difficult things are scary. And when you're talking about building a business, it's not, I mean, it is fun and games sometimes, right? But sometimes it is not fun and games. And there are difficult things that you have to do. And it's easy to put it off because you don't want to. But the second you can switch yourself to the point where you do all the hard stuff first, it gets so much easier. Because then literally, like, your hard stuff might be done within an hour of you starting your day. Those things that would have caused you stress or caused you concern or caused you to sit on the floor in the closet crying, and not to say I haven't been there, but that would have caused any of that kind of thing, you've already taken care of and moved on with your life.
Well, and it gives you a greater sense of accomplishment. Like when you've achieved something that was difficult or uncomfortable, it's like, now you're like, I can handle anything today, right?
Absolutely.
Like, give me all you got. I already slayed this today. Like, I'm good. So I feel like that too. Not only does it kind of make us feel like crap because we know we're avoiding this hard thing or this uncomfortable thing, and so it just makes us feel worse. But when you actually just do it, the sense of relief and accomplishment is even greater than those couple little tasks that you knocked out that really weren't that important, but they were easy.
Absolutely.
So I think that's great advice. That's awesome. So power players, they set their goals high and then they put their full focus and energy on achieving them. And I'd love to know what you're working on right now.
So at the moment, we've undergone so many changes in the last year. Even it's been super fabulous. I love 2019. I'm so excited for 2020. But at the moment, we're actually working on bringing back our Online Course Success Summit. So when this goes live, it should be day one of our summit, which has been an amazing gift that we've been able to put together. I mentioned before, my husband's my partner, and he told me a couple of years ago we were going to do the summit. And I was like, okay, baby. Like, I wasn't ready for the frog, right? It's like not ready.
Yeah.
Hence to put together a summit, I will not lie. But we put it together in 2017 and we did it again in 2019. And we've put 15,000 participants through our summit with a combination of speakers and corporate sponsors, and just really made a huge difference for people. I get notes still from people that went through it and how it impacted them. And it's really amazing to get to have that opportunity to really support others that are in this journey and trying to create success with their online course business. So I'm super excited about that, and that should be going live when this airs. And I've asked you to be a speaker, so hopefully you'll be on that too.
Of course.
I don't want to promise your audience, but
yes, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So how can people find out more about the summit?
Sure. I think it's going to be theonlinecoursesummit.com. That's what it was last year, unless it's a different URL than this year. I'm looking at my husband now, but yeah.
We'll update it in the show notes too. If for some reason that link changes, in the show notes under this, we'll put the correct link if it changes.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Awesome. So when can people start signing up for it?
Before this airs, actually. So as soon as it airs, you should be able to go sign up right away and get in. Each of the talks will stay live for 72 hours. So you want to get in early so that you have access to everybody.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that our listeners got so much value and education from our talk. I hope people will go and connect with Dr. Carrie Rose. She's a wonderful person, business owner, and I'm honored to know her. So Carrie, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be able to impact your audience in any way. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks for listening to Power Players in Business and Life. Be sure to click subscribe. To learn more about Adrienne, visit www.wearepowerplay.com. We'll see you next time.